joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure to have you. You're our first guest as a nonprofit expert.
And I'm honored to be so.
Well, let's tell our viewers a little bit about you. I've known you for several years. So I know you as a grant writer, and now you are the co-founder, co-director of One Earth Conservation, a 501c3. And in the past, you were the development director at Queens Theater in the Park, as well as the grant specialist for Queensborough President. Quite impressive. You've done 24 years of grant writing, and now you are proud parents, you and your husband obviously, proud parents of your daughter who's a freshman in college. Tell everybody about your business partner.
I have an avian partner in my office, my 26-year-old cockatiel, Dusty, who keeps me company while I work.
So obviously you're an animal lover,
Yes,
as well as a climate conservationist, and I know that you sing in a choir, and sometimes you're a belly dancer and visual artist.
yeah, I haven't been doing those things so much lately.
So how do you do all that, and how do you find time and make the time?
Well, when I was first married but didn't have my daughter yet, I didn't think I could be any busier. I was working full time. But then I had my daughter and realized, yes, you can be busier. And you have to learn how to triage and use time management. I continued to work a few months after she was born. And I've been working from home for about 11 years, which really helps as well.
So why did you become a grant writer with that whole background of yours?
Well, when I was working full-time at Queens Theater, our family started having elder care issues, as well as having, at the time she was 7 or 8 years old, my daughter. And so it was just too much with working full-time, so I decided to go out on my own and started working from home, which I love. And Queens Theater was my first client, and then mostly word of mouth, I started getting more clients.
That's great.
Yeah, it's worked out very well for me.
And how do you find the funding for your clients?
Well, since I'm a grant writer, I focus on what we call institutional funders. There are 3 types of those. One is corporate foundations or corporations, private foundations, and government. And they're each a little different from the others. Corporations they want to do good work in the community, but they also want exposure, so it's partly marketing for them. And their applications tend to be simpler, not always, and the timing to get the money tends to be shorter. Private foundations can be anything from a 3-page letter to a full online application with attachments, and their time frames vary enormously, from just a few months to maybe a year. And some well-known foundations are Ford Foundation, Rockefeller, and so forth. And then government funders, I advise clients only to look at government money if they have the capacity for it, because they do tend to give bigger grants, but you have to do a lot of paperwork to get the money, and then once you get an award, there's a lot of paperwork to process it, which is part of what I did when I worked for the borough presidents. I would process government grants.
So you're very familiar with
that.
I'm very familiar with that paperwork. Yes. And how do you keep track of when the grants are due for each client?
Yeah, that's a great question, because most nonprofits have what we call either a development plan or a grants calendar. And that could be as simple as an Excel or a Word spreadsheet, although I don't recommend that. Or there's all kinds of funding software that help you track these things, where you'll have information such as the name of a funder, whether or not there's a deadline, when is the deadline, a description of what they fund, how to apply, and any restrictions such as geographic restrictions or the kind of funding they give, that sort of thing.
And what do you recommend to your clients and your potential clients? Because I would think when I get asked for grant writers, they're always saying, well, what is the grant writer going to do A, B, and C? So what do you tell clients or potential clients, or what is it that, what's the scope of a grant writer?
Yeah, I do everything from the initial research to look for prospects, to writing the actual proposals, helping with budgets. I'm very good with that, and it's a very important part of grant writing. You have to be a detail-oriented person to do grant writing. If you're not detail-oriented, it's probably not the field for you. Yeah,
That's why I'm not in it, okay.
And then also there's reporting requirements.
Right.
Many times if you get a grant, they'll want a final report, sometimes an interim and a final report. So that's the basic scope. So it involves research, it involves writing, it involves keeping track and budgeting as well.
And what are the challenges that you might have with clients in keeping this calendar and keeping all the information and getting the information too?
Well, even before I get to the challenges, it's
Right.
good for clients to know that grant writing is very much a partnership. It's not that here, Gail, do this and I take care of everything.
Right.
There's a lot of give and take because I don't know your organization, especially when I first start with you. And so I need you to give me information to help me write what I need to write. The budgets have to come from the nonprofit. I can help with that, and I know how to take information, let's say from the tax form 990 or an audit, and get what I need.
Right.
But someone has to feed that to me. And then also, if it's an online application, I'll submit it for a client. But if it needs to be mailed out, my policy is I send it back to the client and they do the mailing, because I have multiple clients and it get really crazy if I start mailing out for everybody. I don't know if other grant writers work the same way or not. But whether you work on staff or as a consultant, those steps are all part of the process.
So that brings me to the next question. Why would a client hire a consultant versus an on-staff, or hire an on-staff versus a consultant?
Well, just speaking from my experience, my clients are, for the most part, either small nonprofits that don't have development staff or have very small development staff and use me regularly to serve that function for them in terms of grants.
Okay.
I don't do other kinds of fundraising. But there are some of my larger clients have staffs. They may have a lot of people on staff, but they're just super busy and they need the extra help for them. So it depends on the need of the organization and what resources they have.
Right, and as to hire a full-time grant writer, excuse me, is that different than hiring you, or it's...
Yeah, well, when I was a development director, I did not only do grant writing.
Okay.
I also did events, I worked with their individual giving program and so forth. If an organization is hiring a full-time grant writer, they usually have enough resources to first have a development director, and then maybe have a grant writer, and then they might have a specialist on individual giving.
But that's a very good point you brought up, because a lot of nonprofits, especially the emerging ones or the smaller ones, don't have that staff. And one of the first development people they want to hire is a grant writer. And what do you say to that?
I say if you're brand new, it's too soon.
Okay.
I recommend that a nonprofit have anywhere from a year to 3 years of track record, because you're going to be competing against older and more established nonprofits. Also, you need the capacity to track and keep track of the grant writing. And I also think it's good for a new nonprofit to get some experience themselves with the process, so they'll understand what needs to be done. Some people, when they hire me, they think like I instantly know every funder that would fund them, and they're gonna get every grant they ask for. And no, that's not the case.
Yeah. And I think that's an important point, is that many think that if they hire a grant writer, whether as a consultant or full-time, that their grants will start flowing, and they don't understand that they are still competing with many other nonprofits. And so to be chosen, you have a higher chance with a professional doing it, but it doesn't mean you will be chosen.
That's right. There's a lot of reasons that a proposal might be rejected. One might be it's not a good proposal, for sure. But it also could be they have a limited amount of money and they were just programs they liked better, that you didn't quite fit what they like to fund, and the list goes on and on. So sometimes a funder will let you call for feedback, sometimes they won't. But that's a good thing to do if you can, to get feedback as to how you can improve for the next year.
Great, thank you. Let's not leave on this. Let's talk about One Earth Conservation, your new nonprofit.
Yes.
Tell us about it.
Well, about 2 years ago, I met this amazing woman. Her name is the Reverend Dr. Laura Kim Joyner. She's an avian wildlife veterinarian, a wildlife conservationist, and a Unitarian Universalist minister. And
she's busy too.
Yes, oh yes. And I call her my personal Jane Goodall. She really is like, she works with wild parrots in Latin America, and she's like the Jane Goodall of that particular field. And I started out volunteering for her because I was so supportive of what she was doing. And we hit it off, very compatible together. She's a big picture person, I'm a details person, she does field work, I do grant writing, it just all fit together very well. And we decided in March of 2015 to make the partnership official. We worked with a fiscal sponsor for 2 years until we were able to get our own 501c3. And in addition to the work she does in Central America with wild parrots, we also have something called the Nurture Nature program, which is teaching people to nurture themselves by nurturing nature.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, and we even have coming up shortly a wild walk scheduled in Central Park.
Oh, what fun.
Yeah. But Laura Kim has written a book, if you don't mind, I'd like to show you
please.
the book. It's called Conservation in Time of War, and it's about her experiences over 30 years in Central America as an avian wildlife veterinarian, and it's really an interesting book.
Fascinating.
It's on Amazon. I highly recommend you check it out.
Great. Great. And that's my copy, I assume. So this is perfect for you because it combines your love of the environment and nature as well as animals.
As a matter of fact, I found out my birthday is World Parrot Day.
No.
Couldn't be more perfect. So there you
No,
go.
more perfect. So before we wrap up, are there any resources you'd like to tell our audience about to go to help them with, since you're doing grant writing and nonprofit, you must have resources for them.
Yeah, you actually told me about a great new website called Grant Advisor.
Oh, yes,
where
yes.
people rate foundations, and I took a look at it, but I really want to dig deeper into it because what a great idea to get feedback before you apply to a foundation of what they look for, what do they like, and that sort of thing. But then there's also the Foundation Center, which has an online database, and it also has libraries throughout the U.S. There's GuideStar, which is a great place to look up tax form 990s, where you can get a lot of information about funders. The Better Business Bureau is a good place for charities to find ways to benchmark themselves against, to be a quality charity. And of course, Uplifting Nonprofits and its Nonprofit Cafe, which I've attended many of them. I highly recommend them because not only do you get to speak to experts, they give a presentation, you get to ask questions, but also I love your advice circles where you sit with other people who work in nonprofits and you help each other face challenges of running a nonprofit.
Yeah, I actually learn from it myself all the time, so I'm glad you're enjoying them. Well, Gail, thank you so much for coming today, and I hope you'll come back again.
Yes, and thank you for having me.
My pleasure. And thank you for joining us too. Remember to smile because you make a difference.